Hi everyone, today we're going to talk to Paul, who works in HVAC, and learn a little bit more about his job. So is there any other education or recertifications required for your job?
Yes, I did 6 months of night school to get certified as an air conditioning technician. I worked in the field on the job training while I was in night school. And then as time went on and things changed in the air conditioning business, we went to a different refrigerant and all. You had to get recertified on new technologies that were coming out, new refrigerants, infrared lights, ultraviolet lights, things of that nature. So it was constant where you'd have to go and not necessarily recertify, but once you had your certification, you were fine. But you had to had to stay on top of the curve because things were developing so fast.
Was there a moment when you knew that this was the career that you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, but it was before I was in air conditioning. When I got out of the Navy, I was a machinist, and I worked as a machinist in Pratt & Whitney, United Technologies. I loved working with my hands, but as time went on, I moved up into a salary job. I moved into a managerial position. It meant a suit and a tie every day, et cetera, et cetera. I hated it, but it paid the bills. I, honest to God, hated it. When I moved to Florida and I got into the air conditioning business, I got to work with my hands again. And it was, for me, it was just very satisfying to meet homeowners, different people. When I left their house, their equipment was fixed. It was running. It was just a real feeling of satisfaction. And I never got that when I was working in an office.
What was it like to start out when you were new at air conditioning?
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible. I moved down here and I knew absolutely nothing about air conditioning. I never even had air conditioning when I lived in Connecticut. So I came down here completely green, didn't know anything about air conditioning. The employer that hired me at the start, I rode with him for a couple of weeks. I learned how to do very basic stuff, maintenance, how to clean the air filters, how to check the refrigerant levels, things like that. Shortly after that, that's when I went to the trade school for 6 months, and I learned more and more. And it was a pretty rapid progression, scary at best, and the pay wasn't all that great. I went from an extremely high-paying job. I moved down here. I had to start at the bottom of the ladder, which at that point in time was only $10 an hour.
That's low, especially
now. That's very low. But sometimes you have to take that giant step backwards in order to work your way forward. And that's kind of what I did, up to the point where I was running the company. And I only did air conditioning for 18 years, so it was a pretty fast progression for me.
So when you were doing air conditioning, what was a day in the life like, going to people's houses and fixing?
Well, I would leave the house at 6 o'clock in the morning. We'd get to the office a little before 7. I would sit down. They would give me all the calls that had to be run for the day, and I had other service technicians as well. And I would go through the calls so I knew what we had, whether they were maintenance calls, whether they were air conditioning wasn't running, et cetera, et cetera. I would distribute those to the different technicians, and I would keep a few for myself, and then we would all hit the road. Typically, you call the customer before you get to the house, let them know you're on your way, and then it was nice because you were in the truck. You were your own boss. It was up to you, to fix what you could fix. If one of the other technicians was having trouble or didn't understand something, they would call. You might have to make a quick trip over to wherever their job site was, or maybe there was a new installation and they needed some help. so I would go over there. But then you would work all day until the last job was completed. And, at the end of the day, whether it was 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, you hope that nobody called with a broken air conditioner because we had 24-hour repair service. And then you would call it a day. But some days there were 7-hour days. Some days there were 12, 14-hour days. It depended on time of year.
What was the most rewarding part of your job?
Knowing that when I left the job, a customer was going to be happy. Their air conditioning was running. Their house was getting cool again. They were happy. A lot of my customers were, and you have to realize down here, we dealt with a lot of very wealthy people. They had big houses. They had a lot of air conditioners, so that was nice. People tend not to be trustworthy. As I spent more and more time down here, I could go to a customer's house. They would say, "Hey, Paul, good to see you. You know what you got to do. Just do what you got to do." And some people would even leave me in their home, knowing that when they came back, everything was going to be fine. The house was locked, and their air conditioning was running. I liked that. It was just really enjoyable.
And on the other hand, what was the most challenging part?
You always run into different situations where you're not sure, and troubleshooting, I guess you'd call it, where, you get there and you want to make the right call. Maybe it's sales, trying to, convince somebody that, your air conditioner is 12 years old, 14 years old. You really need a new one. You have to try and sell it. I mean, that's part of the business. That's part of the company. But keeping up with new technology, when a lot of the new stuff started coming out, and believe me, there's a lot of new stuff out there, you constantly had to refresh yourself to keep up with what was going on. Otherwise, you couldn't do your job properly.
My last question for you is, do you have any advice for teenagers like my age who are interested in following your career path?
My answer to that is, I think too much pressure is put on kids today to go to college. You truly do not have to go to college to earn a good living. I think the percentage of people that go to college and move into those high $250,000, $350,000, $400,000 jobs, top of the corporate ladder stuff, it's minuscule. It's maybe 0.5%, maybe 1%. Too much pressure. Trade schools for a lot of kids are really the answer. If you're good with your hands, if you like working with people, if you like the feeling that you've accomplished something other than paperwork, maybe you want to look at a trade school. It's not such a bad deal. And trade school people now, it may not sound like a lot, but a good air conditioning technician right now is making $35 to $40 an hour. That's not chump change.
That's not chump change.
Yeah, and that's true in all the trades. Plumbers are making that. Electricians are making that. Welders are making that. Auto mechanics. Have you ever taken your car to the auto dealer lately? I take mine. They get $145 an hour just to try and figure out what was wrong with the car. I look, and I know this because I just came from the dealer. If you own a BMW or a Mercedes or some of the higher end cars, the dealers down here get $365 an hour to work on your car if you own a high end car. A lot of that money goes to the repair technician. Now, granted, you have to be certified to get that kind of job and any type of decent job. But, yeah, my advice to people is don't get obsessed with needing a college education to make a good living. You really don't. You really don't.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of Occupation Connection. If you enjoyed what you saw, make sure to click the subscribe button, hit the like button, and leave a good comment below.